Chapter 3. When the sails were up and the halyards cleated off to the base of the mast, he closed the front hatch, secured it from the inside, unsnapped the line that held the tiller, or helm, over to the side, and jumped off onto the dock. It took him a minute to uncleat the floor lines that held the Frog in her slip and throw them down inside the cabin. Then he pushed her gently backwards until she was sliding well away from the dock, jumped aboard, and pushed the tiller sideways. She was moving very slowly, the wind pushing her a bit and adding to the movement. David had started by giving her a nudge, and when he held the tiller over, it swung her stern around so she lay side to the wind in the large open area to the rear of the slip. The mainsail and jib were both still luffing, but he grabbed the main sheet and pulled the sail in until it filled, and the Frog responded almost instantly by nosing forward. He cleated the sheet off, grabbed the jib sheet, and pulled the jib in until it filled too. The Frog jumped up to a speed of 4.5 knots. It was a graceful, clean, neat, silent maneuver. Owen had taught him to sail from the dock before he let him sail in the open. Most people use their motors to get out of the marina, firing them up in the slip and backing out with a great noise and smell. That's how Owen put it, a great noise and smell. But he had made David learn the feel of the boat, learn to ease her backwards out of the slip gently, silently, then let the sails fill and move forward effortlessly. "She's made to move with the wind," Owen would say, "made to feel the wind and move with it. The motor is an insult." The wind was perhaps 20 knots now, perfect for driving the Frog at maximum speed and comfort. And as he turned toward the harbor, breakwaters and mouth, moved her nose up into the direction of the wind a bit, he noticed that the wind came directly across his beam, straight from the north as he headed west out of the harbor. It was a beam reach, the fastest way to sail across the face of the wind, and he tuned the mainsail and jib to make the curved bellies of power that meant they were using as much as the wind as possible. The Frog responded like a thing alive. She fairly jumped forward in the smooth water of the marina. David brought her up a bit more into the wind as he sailed between the two breakwaters made of huge stones, two retaining walls that struck out into the ocean. Across the front of the two walls, to block the seas from entering the harbor, was another retaining wall of boulders. He fought the Frog out to sea, holding her to the high side of the harbor mouth, the upwind north side, to give himself as much room as possible to clear the cross wall. As he came to the opening, he brought her downwind a bit, let the sails out a hair, and the Frog slipped cleanly beyond the harbor and into the open sea. Immediately the swells took her. In the marina, the water was like a lake, sheltered and placid. But as soon as the Frog cleared the retaining walls, she took the full Pacific Ocean head on. David could never get over the size of it, the feel of the swells. All of the land masses of all the earth could fit easily into the Pacific, and there would still be plenty of water left. It was staggering. Storms from China mixed with storms from Alaska, and power from those storms mixed in turn with storms from Australia and the swells. The movement of the water from all of those places came to the coast of California, across thousands and thousands of miles. Swells from other continents, from other worlds came under the Frog now, as she cleared the breakwaters, and David thought again, or still, of Owen. Every time they cleared the harbor, or every time that David was with him, Owen had become silent, looking out at the sea. It was a silence of thought, almost of reverence, a kind of worship, and David now did the same, felt the same. The sea coming under the Frog, the huge swells, sometimes tottering 20 feet above the cockpit, that slid like oil under the boat and brought her sliding up and over and down into the next swell, were like friendly mountains of water. They were not storm-driven waves. David had seen those because Owen had always carefully checked the weather before taking him on on trips, so he'd never seen them, but he had heard of them. Storm waves that tipped whole ships over and drove them underwater. These swells were more like a rising in the water, a lifting that seemed to come from the earth itself, as if a hand was cradling and holding the frog. And the smell was different as well. In the harbor there was a stink of living, the smell from other boats, the smell from cars driving by. As soon as the frog cleared the harbor, the wind brought the smell of the sea, the rich, full smell of the sea, the Pacific, across the boat, and it was like a bath in a new wind. It was close to dusk now. The sun was just about the horizon out ahead of the frog, and David eased her off of the wind a bit more, letting the sails out enough to keep them bellied well, and pointed the bowstring straight at the sun. He checked the compass and saw that he was standing just south of west, close to 250 degrees, and he mentally noted the direction. Slightly to his right, and out across about 15 miles, was Anacapa Rocks and Santa Cruz Island, and he wanted to miss them with the room to spare. If he ran a line just south of the Channel Islands and rocks, there was nothing until the Philippines, nothing until Japan but ocean, and that was where Owen wanted to be. "Take me out alone," Owen had said, "until you can't see land and leave me there." And he would do it. A night sail for Owen would be perfect. By dawn the frog should be well out of sight of land, well out to sea. David did some further mental calculations. He was making 7 knots, about 9 miles an hour. If he held it for 10 hours, he'd be 90 miles out at dawn. He hadn't checked the weather and felt vaguely unsettled about that because the frog didn't have any radio gear except a cheap little transmitter battery-powered receiver that hardly ever worked right, so he couldn't listen for weather reports. But it was a good boat, and there didn't seem to be any bad weather coming. The evening sky was clear and the wind steady. He would sail a line at 250 degrees west into the Pacific, a line west for Owen into the night. He would sail till morning, and while he was sailing, holding a true line for Owen, he would think of his uncle and think of all that Owen had been to him. A chill took him, and he lashed the tiller over with the tail of the mainstream and went below for a moment to get his windbreaker. When he came up, the sun was setting. Just that fast. Directly in front of the frog, the sun seemed to boil down into the sea, almost as fast as it took him to think of it. And as it sank, it cut a reddish golden beam across the sea, a golden path that came from the sun across the sea to splash its light against the frog, against David's face as he slid the cabin hatch closed and settled at the helm again. It was so beautiful, it took his breath away, and he thought that it was like a path for the boat. No, not the boat. It was a path for Owen, a golden path for Owen. David smiled. Owen would think it was so hokey, so stupid to think that. He hated stuff like that, hated omens. But it was there. The gold was there ahead, calling, and David hunkered down to the tiller and held the frog on course and thought, hokey or not, he would follow it into the night.